So today we're going to start with the basics, particularly around AI. During the month of July, we will focus on all things ed tech. So we invite you to join us for this series. I'm sharing in the chat the link to register. But throughout this series, we're going to start today with the basics, and then on July 8th, we're going to, well, let me roll back a second. Next week, we will have Smart Start with Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation around detecting and supporting learning differences. On July 8th, we'll have a session on technology for home learning and school connection with Venture Studios and Springboard. On July 15th, we'll join Digital Promise for a session on From Skepticism to Enthusiasm. So we'll find out a little bit about where you're at and look at AI and EdTech's role in teaching and learning. And then on July 22nd, we will talk about technology enhanced tutoring. This series culminates in GLR Week with a session on guardrails and guidelines around screen time, AI, and privacy. And so we hope you'll join us for this whole series. But today's about the basics and what you need to know about AI in very simple language. I have the pleasure of introducing our panel today. So first with us, we have Nathan Kriya, policy analyst with the Ed Trust, who spent a lot of time thinking about how to assure diverse and equitable AI implementation. Neka McGee, who is the founder of Moonyon Global, but is also a researcher on AI in K-12 and has been a classroom teacher. Aaron Moe, the CEO of Innovate Ed, who inspired this session today and has a lot to say as we get started about how we should be thinking about and what we should know about AI. Fran Newberg from the School District of Philadelphia, who is the Deputy Chief of the Office of Education Technology. And our moderator today is Kara Caruso. He's the Director of Digital Learning and Innovation in New York City Public Schools. And so you can see, if you spent much time, that we have an incredible panel with us. I'm sharing in the chat their complete bios so you can learn a little bit more about them. But in the meantime, I am going to pass the conversation over to Tara.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone from New York on this very hot day. This is going to be a cool session, so we're excited to get started. And I think we're going to start off with a poll just to engage everyone in how you're feeling about AI. So, how would you rate your enthusiasm level around AI in education today? We can just go with today. We're all going to be present here for the next hour together. So, how would you rate your enthusiasm? And we'll give some good wait time as a good teacher always does to let everyone just do that polling quiz. Okay. So hopefully everyone can see on the screen as I can. We're a little bit all over the place with our levels of enthusiasm, falling in right at that 50% or 5 mark for 17% around the halfway mark, which is really where I fall today. And so in future, in this learning series and in our future webinars on here, we're going to be thinking through how we move to a level of enthusiasm through pedagogy and really re-engage all of our educators in the field of education in how technology can be a transformative and exciting and engaging and enthusiastic force for change. So with that, we're also going to shift to one more question just to keep our minds moving. We can jump to the next slide here and really thinking of the human side of AI. Let's think of, would you rather, a great would you rather question to start with, would you rather trust a self-driving car or a doctor powered by AI? So let's see what everyone thinks here. Would you rather trust a self-driving car or a doctor powered by AI? So with this question, we're really trying to center our thinking on when does AI and how does AI remain human in a very technology-driven world. And so we'll see those results pop up quite quickly. And also just want to say it's great seeing people from all over the country on this webinar. Um, and I think while we're waiting for that poll to pop up, I'd love to introduce my friend and colleague. I think it popped up quickly. Okay, here we go. Self-driving car. We're about halfway here. Self-driving car, 52%, and doctor powered by AI, 48%. Very interesting. I'd be with the doctor powered by AI. I haven't quite got to the point where I'm jumping into a self-driving car, even though I've had the chance. But love to introduce Aaron Moat, CEO of Innovate EDU, who I'm going to pass this over to. And Aaron's going to take us through a bunch of slides very quickly. Just remember, you're going to get all these slides after. And so without further ado, passing it over to my friend Aaron Moat.
Hi, y'all. Well, it's so great to see you. And again, you're going to get these slides. So there's a lot of information on these slides, and we're really going to try to get you from basics to deployment is my goal in the next 15 minutes. And for us to really tee up an important conversation, not just about AI and what it is, but how it could potentially change education. And so I love the 50-50. I also love the sort of scaled, linear scale there in terms of enthusiasm, because you're not alone. More than 52% of Americans are more nervous about this technology than they are excited. I think I saw someone say in the chat, excited by the potential, but also scared of the potential. Folks not wanting an AI powered doctor or a self-driving car. And so, first of all, you're not alone. Americans, educators, families, communities aren't yet sure about this technology, both its promise and its peril. So let's walk into this conversation with that realism. So now let's quickly go through some AI basics that I hope will level set with folks a little bit about this technology. I'm going to focus the majority of my comments today on generative AI. That's things you hear about like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. And so it's really important to adopt this frame when we're talking about AI, that it's an arrival technology. What does that mean? It means it's not blockchain and it's not Web3. It is an arrival technology that is going to reorder the way we work, we learn, we live, and how we relate to each other. And here's the bad news. In education, we're not great with arrival technologies. Let's go in the Wayback Machine to when we built computer labs in schools. These are technologies that maximally sort of reorder the way we engage in our everyday lives. We are better in education with adoption technologies, right? A new iPad, a new computer, but arrival technologies are particularly hard in systems like education because arrival technologies are disruptive to systems. Access to this technology and arrival technologies is often defined with a close corollary between economic wealth and opportunity. So we're already seeing this in data about AI, who has access and who doesn't, who feels comfortable and who doesn't. Again, correlated with economic opportunity and prosperity and access to this technology. It's something we really, really need to be attentive to. And finally, it's just important to say arrival technologies will harm if they are not managed. But AI isn't new. But the fact now that AI is in consumers' hands at the level it is and at the power and adoption rate is, that is the arrival technology, the adoption of Gen AI into our everyday lives. Next slide. So I'm a big fan of Thomas Kuhn. For the science teachers out there, we probably have something in common, the structure of scientific revolution. But I love this slide because, and again, you're going to get these slides. It helps you kind of understand how we got here. AI systems were built and developed, and actually the very first chatbot was the health chatbot for generative AI in the 1960s. So these systems have been building and building over decades, and but the speed at which they're evolving now is really supercharged. And so if you go the next slide, this is the way I like to think of it. Originally, AI learned from humans. And so we fed human data, humans trained it, so on and so forth. Then AI really went to curated data, so specific data sets, specific knowledge graphs. Then it wanted to consume any kind of data. So that's where you're seeing a lot of conversation right now about fair use, a lot of conversation about what is feeding these models. And now generative AI has this appetite to learn from any kind of data about the world in any way that it can transfer to novel situations. That is the arrival technology. And the speed at which that fourth one is happening is exponential. That has happened in the last 4 years, where frankly, the other three took 4 decades. Next slide. What is AI? Okay, so AI is in your everyday lives already. So many of you probably shop online. Maybe you use Amazon or even Target. AI is in the background, always recommending products, recommending ways to like source the closest product for you. Robotic tractors in our rural communities, precision architecture, particularly with drones. If you're getting that package from Amazon, it's in warehouse fulfillment. If you've traveled overseas, that AI is being used to scan for risks. Should you be using your credit card overseas? Or is this like a transaction that's at the local convenience store, but you never shop there? So AI is helping sort of make those determinations. It is absolutely influencing your insurance rate, both your personal insurance rate and your risk, and your property insurance rate. NASA is using it to project and look at images from space. We actually just got some brand new images yesterday from a bunch of telescopes that were used and enhanced by AI. Text to speech. This is something we see all the time being used, whether it's in your personal cell device or whether that's in your classrooms. Foreign language translation. Maybe some of you are Duolingo or you use Google Translate. Also now devices in real time are translating AI, using AI. And then finally, if you have used Google Maps or Waze or any type of mapping technology or navigation, you are using AI. So already AI is all around us. Next slide. But it is not alive. It's not smarter than humans. It is not killer robots. I know sometimes we have like the Terminator vibe. It's not only for people who are geniuses or computer scientists. It really is, as I shared with you, in our everyday lives, and is something that can be accessed by everyone. This is why AI literacy is so foundational to our move forward in education. It's always physical. So what does that mean? It means it's always inside our computer software or inside our phone apps or in an application. It's not ubiquitously all around us all the time. It needs a device to harness it. And frankly, it's not going away. It is so already deeply embedded in the way you shop, in the way you browse the internet, in the way you use and others use data about you, that there is no turning back the clock at this point. Next slide. So there's lots of types of AI systems out there. Again, we're really in kind of the baseline knowledge building. And this is around kind of 4 systems I want you to know about at least. One are narrow AI systems. These are systems that are built to take on a specific task and to perform it efficiently. Then we have sort of general AI systems. These are systems that you're seeing in just general generative AI models. Those are general AI systems. There's reinforcement learning. This is a very common thing that you are seeing in EdTech tools. This is when it's learning from trial and error and processes that enhance performance. So trying different tones, trying different ways to probe and ask questions, very, very common in tutoring and gamification software. And then finally, artificial superintelligence. So if you've heard about agentic AI, if you've heard about AGI, this is what folks are talking about. They're talking about future AI capabilities and systems that go beyond current human intelligence. And I will just say one caveat here. We talk about narrow AI systems. That can also be an agent or an agentic AI. But really this sort of AGI that you hear people talking about is this like super intelligent system that could across domains. Next slide. Okay, lots to think about here. AI is a story of promise and peril. We're seeing that in the polls. We're seeing that in American sort of opinion. And we need to be thinking really about 4 things when we're thinking about the peril of AI and the risks. That includes bias. So first, there's no AI tool out in the marketplace right now that does not have bias. If you are talking to an ed tech vendor or you're talking to a technology vendor and they say, oh, our tool has no bias, they're lying. Don't buy that tool. What you can do is work to mitigate bias, but because most AI systems, remember, learn from data, learn from humans, there's already baked in bias. And so a lot of the work that needs to be done in AI system development is to mitigate bias, not eliminate it. Protections for privacy are really important. I'm excited for Fran to talk to you a little bit about what Philadelphia is doing in terms of supporting privacy and transparency and accountability. They all go together. But understanding what is training the models when AI is being used are the two pieces around transparency and accountability. Next slide. So I lead an alliance called EdSafe AI Alliance. Many of the folks that are on this call are thinking about frameworks like the SAFE framework, next slide, that is helping folks ask really important questions around policy, practice, and technology around these considerations. And that framework is really focused on safety. So that's the privacy, security, do no harm, accountability, fairness, and then efficacy. And you really need to start, whether you're just starting with AI tools or whether you're just starting to have conversations in your stakeholder communities. I will tell you that overwhelmingly communities, families, Americans, young people are most concerned about safety. So you really need to start there when you're starting to have these conversations and explore AI use in your schools and in your communities. Next slide. Here's the good news. AI is not yet human, right? We talked about human superintelligence. You see a lot of folks racing to try to find that, but AI is not there yet. And education continues to remain a human enterprise. And so it lacks the ability to introspect from different viewpoints. It hallucinates, and we actually call something a very human term when it gets something wrong. We say it hallucinates. It's not real. It's not alive. It lacks emotional intelligence. It lacks sensory perception. And it lacks right now the ability to connect complex information across domains. Miriam, I see your question in the chat. Yet, I put that up there because there are so many efforts underway in order to both make AI feel more human from a consumer perspective. Things like when you're talking to an artificial intelligence voice, it is programmed to breathe and to pause and to have a vocal intonation. And this race towards artificial superintelligence is actually about overcoming some of these barriers that I list on the slide. Next slide. Okay, so what do we do? So I love John Seely Brown and the way that he talks about young people and learning and the types of learning experiences we want to create. And his research is, again, decades old, but it's really, really important. So he thinks about our parents and who we are. We're really, our parents were on steamships. They charted sort of one course and they arrived there without much need for navigation. The next slide, please. We were on sailboats. With some skillful tacking, we got where we wanted to go. But again, we sort of knew the destination. We knew how to get there. We had the tools to be able to navigate it. Our students today are whitewater kayakers. They not only are going to have the resilience and the persistence to be able to read the currents of a fast evolving and changing economy and society, but also find out where the rocks are and where the waves are, so that they don't crash into them. And so when we think about the types of learning experiences we need to think about, I'm now in the deployment phase. When we think about AI, I want you to be thinking about a couple of things. Next slide. So how do we think about collaboration between humans and AI? The most important skill that employers are looking for this year in hiring college graduates and in this hiring cycle of new early stage careers is, how does a young person manage and work alongside AI? How can AI assist human tasks? How can humans train AI to be able to do tasks, to be more productive and efficient? And how is there synergy and innovation between AI tools and AI tasks and humans in the workforce? So one of the most important skills that's going to evolve is, can you manage AI as a teammate? Something for us to really think about when we think about this as an arrival technology in education. Next slide. So we need to be thinking about a couple things here. AI-powered learning, skills for the future, and then this idea of lifelong learning. It's not going to be enough, given the pace of change and the pace of technology, for us to just think we're going to deliver the skills once and we're not going to have to retrain, retool, re-upskill. And so how do we really think about this cycle of technology enhanced education as not necessarily narrowly confined to early ed or K-12 or high school, post-secondary, so on and so forth. But how do we really think about cultivating those skills for lifelong learning? That's not new. That's something we've always tried to think about in education. And so again, it's these mix of both technical skills, soft or durable skills, and this idea of adaptability. And so as we're thinking about how this technology will compel us to think about pedagogy and practice, going back to Tara's original prompt, these are the things we need to be thinking about as we evolve into deployment. I think that is it. And Tara, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Woo! Well, you did share a lot, Erin, because you're so knowledgeable. And now we're gonna hear from all the other great experts who are with us from their individual context. So I'd love to invite all the panelists on screen now. And thank you, Erin, for all of that. I know it's just the tip of the iceberg, and there's some questions that I'm sure you can help to answer in the Q&A there. And in the interest of time, to my panelists, we're gonna dive into this conversation. And so first, I'm gonna ask you two things. When you answer your question, and I'll share the question in a second, can you please share how you specifically support AI in your context? And then for the general question for everyone, what are the biggest fears and potential pitfalls for AI in education? And so we will start with Nika on that.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. This is amazing. And thank you, Erin, for setting the tone. I want to start with a quote because I think it's very interesting. And this quote is this: rather than trying to re-implement our current educational system on computers, we must ask how we can use computers to reshape education in a way that is more effective and more relevant to our modern world. And this was an interesting paper written by Professors Roger Schenck and Daniel Edison about AI in education. It comes from the Journal of AI in Education in 1989. And so when we think about, and Erin picked up on this, about AI in general not being a new technology, AI in education is not a new implementation or integration or thought process. And one of my primary concerns is that because it is thought of as novel, as something new, we don't rely as much on foundational pieces than we should. We rely on the moment instead of the mission. And I think it's important to stick to foundational pieces as a start, as a foundation. I don't want to take away the importance of anything that's new, anything that's progressive, anything that's innovative, but I feel that we ignore the foundational pieces to our own peril. And there are many lessons there that we can learn from the people who started this work in AI and education. So that's one way I wanted to lead in terms of my major concern is focus on anchor pieces, foundational pieces, research-based practices that have been around for almost 4 decades.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I love that you started with a quote and research, because I do think that, one thing for all of us to share and think about is when in education, we often think of this either or mentality where it can be a yes and. And so with that, would love to hear from Nathan, from your perspective.
Yeah, would love to. Again, echoing the sentiment that I'm so happy to be here and to be speaking with folks today. My name is Nathan Kriya. I'm at EdTrust. For folks who might not be familiar with EdTrust, really our mission is to advance policies and practices that dismantle the racial and economic barriers embedded in the American education system. And so the goal in terms of AI implementation, I actually don't do much AI implementation directly with districts or schools. A big part of my role right now is to learn as much as possible about what's happening at this intersection of generative AI and education. And during that process, which has been about like the last year and a half, 2 years, I have garnered a lot of fears. And before I kind of get into some of them, I do want to preface that I do see a lot of hope here. As Aaron talked about, this is really an arrival technology, and it's here, and students are using it, and teachers are using it. And so we, as equity advocates, as folks who are concerned, I think really need to be in this space, advocating on this space, and learning about what's happening in our educational systems. As for like some of the fears, I want to focus on one. There's others I have, right? I'm worried about the lack of current generative AI research and the intersection of that and education, right? So we're hearing a lot about tools. We're not seeing a lot of research that links specific tools or utilizations to increase student outcomes, for example, right? I fear about the fact that not every student has access to technology or internet, which I'll talk about later, I imagine. But one of my biggest fears is something Aaron talked about, which is really about the bias of large language models. So, we heard a bit about how these are trained. They really scrub the internet, right? And there's a growing body of research that's really showcasing how large language models, the outputs, can express a lot of biases that are reflected from the training data. There's a lot of growing research on this. One study I will reference, and I can put the link in chat. It's this article called "What's in a Name: Auditing Large Language Models for Race and Gender Bias." And this was written by folks that are associated with Stanford Law School and Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered AI. But this is directly from their abstract. They say, quote, "Advice from large language models systematically disadvantages names that are commonly associated with racial minorities and women." And you can see this really clearly actually in some of the image generators. I don't know if you remember a year ago, a year and a half ago, folks were kind of experimenting with these image generators and saying, give me a picture of a CEO and it would just be white men. Give me a picture of nurses and it would just be white women. And that is easy to see with an image generator, but it can be harder to see in text-based platforms. And as Aaron discussed, the bias is there, and I don't know if it's really going away. And so my fear is that teachers and education leaders use these tools without learning or knowing that these biases exist, right? For tasks such as grading papers or creating lesson plans or whatever it may be. Included in this fear is the fact that teachers can't do this alone. And so I worry also that there won't be financial supports from policymakers to help schools do this work. So that is generally, I think, my biggest fear, and I'll hand it back over.
Thank you, Nathan. Very rich answer. And I think just in that connection, Fran, I'd love to hear from you, working in a school district, and maybe building off of what Nathan said and giving your own perspective as well.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Fran Newberg, School District of Philadelphia. I have been instrumental in supporting the development of guardrails and guidelines that we released in this August, almost a year ago. And also for the past year, engaging in professional development and a lot of small professional learning communities with teachers across the school district. My biggest fear is that we don't embrace the opportunity. There are a lot of risks. But I liken this to social media about 10, 15 years ago. I felt as educators, we wanted it to stay outside the schoolhouse. And we've had AI embedded in our tools now for many years, as Erin shared. But generative AI and chatbots are a different breed. And I believe that teachers and educators, we have to embrace the opportunity. We have to understand the tools, and we have to know that when our students go home, they will be using them. And at the same time, understand and try to mitigate the risks. The opportunities and risks go hand in hand. And I believe that in education, we're very slow to adopt. And I know this is a disruptive technology, but even with the other technologies that we brought them to our classrooms, and I never felt like they were fully embraced. And I think we're at a pivotal moment. I think this is as huge as when the internet was introduced to all of us. So my biggest fear is that we don't get every educator on board to understand this opportunity and educate our students on how to use it ethically and responsibly when they're in their homes. But I also think it's a very exciting moment because I do think that there are some tools that can be transformational.
So, Fran, you are on the high side of the enthusiasm, I think, then. That's what I'm hearing.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I put myself at a 7, and
Okay.
normally I'm at like around a 4, but I really think that used well, and the hardest part is to open the hearts and minds of teachers here. These tools, we learned this in the pandemic. Tools do not teach students by themselves. It's the teacher in combination with a high quality tool. So I'm more excited, but it's really important. And this is where we need state departments of education, like literacy, AI literacy, media literacy, digital literacy should be a core requirement. It is not. But I'm enthusiastic because in my career in ed tech, which is long, this is, I think, one of the most exciting moments if we can get all of the policies, guidelines, laws, everything coalescing and aligning.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, Fran, and cohesive, right? And like, not having a million versions of frameworks and vocabulary and definitions. What's this shared experience? So, Erin, I'm going to pass it to you, and then I'll jump in quickly, and we'll jump to the next question. I know you already shared a lot, but I'd love to hear your quick take.
Yeah, so I just want to like double click on the AI literacy piece. I think you don't have to love this technology, but we cannot deprive educators and students, families, and communities of the opportunity to learn about what it is and to make a choice. And so I think we must help young people and everyone in our society interrogate both the inputs, to Nathan's point, and the outputs of this technology. And you can only do that if this is a foundational literacy. And I think the thing that as a woman who's a computer scientist, who's been working in technology for a really long time, I am most worried that we will miss the boat on the access, opportunity, and foundational literacy piece of this work, which I think is the most urgent question for right now. How do we equip all young people, all of our communities, with the knowledge to engage? And then they can make a choice.
So what I'm hearing really is empowering our youth, and this connects to the role I'm playing now, empowering our youth with those foundational literacies. So in New York City, we're really focusing on foundational math. Sorry, we're focusing on strengthening foundational mathematics and literacy. And so how does AI and technology become part of that core requirement that leads to all else? And so again, Tara here, Director of Digital Learning and Innovation for New York City Public Schools. We have 900,000 plus students, 1,800 schools, largest public school district in America. And I've been, during the pandemic, played the role of Director of Citywide Ed Tech in our IT division and started doing AI, really just machine learning solutions since 2020. And fast forward to now, where I shifted a few years ago to lead the team that I lead now, really focused on how do we support leaders and educators in safe, responsible use of AI, and now more primarily, how is that going to support our core initiatives of reading and math? And so, also with Erin, launched the first K-12 AI policy lab with the EdSafe AI Alliance. And that really was focused that really was focused on bringing together disrupting in a positive way unlikely collaborations, both internal collaborations within a school district and then external collaborations. And so fast forward again to 3 years later, I think where I'm concerned is that we are not moving fast enough cohesively as education systems. And so, but we have many more questions to jump through. And so I want to make sure that we get through all of them. So I'm going to move on to the next question here. And really thinking of, let me make sure I'm in the right spot. Really thinking of the landscape of education and thinking of the role of teachers in, and I say educators too in New York City, because I consider teachers related service providers, speech therapists. There's so many different ways we have educators and teachers within our systems. So thinking of the role of a teacher and educator in an AI educational landscape, how can we really support that primary role in adapting to this new reality? And Nathan, I'd love to start with you again.
Yeah, no, and I think it kind of segues really nicely from these comments from Fran and Aaron about the importance of AI literacy. So when I'm thinking about what do teachers need the most in this current moment, it's really support. And to kind of provide some more context here, we're starting to see a lot of states and organizations and entities build guidance, right? Build resources, informational resources for schools and districts and policymakers. And this is not, happening across all guidance, but a trend I'm starting to see with the emergence of more and more guidance is that oftentimes it seems like the onus, like the responsibility of AI readiness and adoption and implementation is being placed directly on school and district leaders and teachers, right? And to be very clear, I think this guidance is very important regardless. And I use it in my day-to-day, a lot of this guidance. This is important foundational knowledge building work. But I don't see any systematic mechanism to support districts and schools in implementing guidance, in developing AI literacy trainings, in developing internal AI policies, training staff on procurement. I mean, like the whole thing. This is happening in pockets. You referenced, Tara, the policy lab. Like this work is happening in that policy lab. It's happening in other places, but you're not seeing like momentum from state governments or the federal level yet to really provide that targeted support so all districts can access that support. And the reason why this is important, and I don't mean to get political, I don't think this is a political statement, but it's 2025. But teachers and school staff right now are vastly overworked and vastly underpaid. And there are teachers and systems everywhere that do not have the capacity to prioritize AI. And it sometimes feels like folks in the policy space are essentially saying, here's just another thing to add to your plate, right? Directly to teachers. And so full circle, I think the best way we can support teachers is through policy that's at all levels of governance, right? That is providing resources that's both informational and financial to support districts and staff as they engage with AI technologies. This includes AI literacy. We cannot ask teachers in schools to figure this out on their own. And if we do that, I worry that AI is just going to emerge as the next digital divide.
So I'm hearing back from you really is what are those foundational pieces from policy to financial resource and investment to actually what's the what of AI literacy? Nick, I'm really interested in your perspective on this, particularly like what's that foundational knowledge base that how do we build that together? And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you so much, Tara. As you mentioned, I am a researcher. Part of my work is research. I actually did my doctoral studies on AI in education and its implementation in K-12 systems in the United States. And most of the work was done before ChatGPT came out. In addition, I launched 2 AI initiatives in districts before ChatGPT came out. And the perspective is different between, and Fran made an important point, the kind of pre-ChatGPT generative AI era and the post-ChatGPT era. But one thing that hasn't changed, and the research has borne it out, is the fact that we are not including teachers in the process, yet we want them to do the work. So as long as we are expecting teachers we're telling them things. I was guilty. I was a CAO. I readily admit I'll be vulnerable. Here's this shiny new initiative. Come on, let's go. Let me put this extra thing on your plate. It's going to work out very well. And by December, when it's time for testing, we have another dusty binder on the shelf. And I learned my lesson. And so the second time that we worked on, implementing the second AI initiative, I said, we have to bring teachers into the fold. We not only, and going to your point, we have to bring educators into the fold. So it wasn't just teachers, it was other educators. So then you start to have that buy-in. So when it comes to the role of the teacher, I'm going to highly stress that without their employment, their involvement in the development and deployment of AI systems, it will fail. Mark my words, it will be a dusty binder on the shelf, and we will move on to the next thing. And before I move on, the other thing about the teachers that was very important, I learned this as a district administrator. I was in my feelings, but research bears this out. Teachers don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from their colleagues. They want to hear from the people who are doing the work alongside with them. And what I am seeing in professional development, no, this is not a knock. It's just the truth. And what people are telling us is they're seeing people that are far removed from their reality in the classroom each and every day, telling them how to do the business of AI. And I would stress again, and many of you who know me have heard me hear me have beating this drum for years. Train teachers to train teachers. They want to hear from their colleague down the hall that is in the work with them. And that goes back to that divide. The divide is as essential as across the hall. If one teacher is doing AI literacy and the other teacher isn't, that is a divide. If the outputs don't reflect the cultural realities of our classrooms, that is not access. That is just another computer. And so that's where my role of the teacher is. And I will pass it back to you, Tara.
Well, I'm going to pass it to Erin and then Fran. I might go to Fran because I feel like she's chomping at the bit. Jump in, Fran. Come on.
I am. I'm like,
Make it organic.
Nika, yes. So teachers need to hear from teachers, absolutely. And I'll talk a little bit about not only the role of teachers, but how we supported them. So even though we all know that AI has been around for decades, this was a new moment. What was it, November of 2022 with ChatGPT? It was a pivotal moment. And we wanted teachers, educators' voices in the development of guidelines and guardrails. But then we also realized that they weren't really sure. They did not have the AI literacy to provide feedback. So we convened a lot of sessions, parents, teachers, teacher coaches, assistant superintendents. Like, think about the whole structure of school systems. We convened 10 or 15 of them. And the first part of the session was AI literacy. Just really helping people understand what have we used in the past 10, 15, maybe 20 years? What is so different right now in this moment? So I think that was, affirming what Nika is saying. In order to have the voices of teachers, we need to help educate teachers. And the guidelines that we produced, I think, really helped teachers because they were actually asking, what are the things I can do? As like just dipping my toe in the water and getting more and more proficient. So we ended up calling it a continuum of use. Here are certain ways that you can use it. And we also proposed a continuum of use for students. And I think that was very helpful to do that. We also, I think, to your point, Tara, there's more than just teachers in a system. So, and this is very difficult. I don't know what it's like in New York and other districts and other systems, but to get professional development for all, we were able to offer an asynchronous course for everyone. We all talk about data privacy and assume people understand what we're talking about, but we started to educate all of our teachers, all of our educators. We restrict a lot in Philadelphia. But why are we restricting things? It's protecting. So we knew that in order for everyone to have the literacy they need to be really proficient AI users, we had to educate them. So we have offered an a data privacy and AI literacy course for everyone. So I think that really supports teachers. It supports them. It helps them to understand what a hallucination is. What kind of bias could there be? Why should I be concerned about using a free tool? So I think that creates a lot of agency for teachers, for educators, for classroom assistants in utilizing the tools. And the other thing we did that's maybe unpopular is we've narrowed the field. We really are very focused on data privacy and network security, and we also educated people about what does it mean. And we only use tools where we have terms of service that protect our data and protect our network.
I have a question for you, follow-up question. Do you have a list of like validated tools? Like we have a lot of, we're so big in New York City. We have a lot of compliant tools, but have you gone deeper? Because I also love the idea of combining, and I'm taking it back, so I'm learning while moderating here.
Yes.
Combining required data privacy training and integrating AI in that existing required
No,
training. No, but because it does contextualize it, brings it together. I think it's brilliant. But do you have like a list of beyond just like all approved tools that are compliant, ones that are AI specific? Like, have you narrowed that much?
we have created a website with all of we call them the core adopted tools and also free tools that we've evaluated and have MOUs in place. And the whole course came out of about 2 years ago, realizing that we were perceived as the Department of No, but we really wanted everyone to understand where we were coming from and what data privacy meant, not just for students, not just FERPA, but you as an individual. They're mining and selling your data too. So I think that was a very positive move. So we have a website to answer your question. It has 130 tools on it. You can segment it by subject. You can segment it by grade level. We are talking about now putting AI markers on them so that they understand that there's an AI foundation to the tool. Right now, I think many of our educators would look at Gemini and Adobe Express right now as our AI-driven tools, but we've been talking about the fact that AI powers many, many, many more of those tools. Yes.
Great, thank you. And I just want to recognize we see the questions in the chat. We are going to get to them. I don't want people to feel like they're not seen. Aaron, jump in here, and then we'll move on, and we definitely will get to your questions. And if you can't use the chat or the Q&A, or if you can use the chat, put them in the chat, and we'll still get back to them. So, Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to pull out a couple of threads because I do think Fran has done an extraordinary job in Philadelphia, and there's a couple other school districts that I just think are best in class and are doing extraordinary work and are putting the work in. So just things Fran has done that anyone can do right now. Transparency, right? What transparency are you creating within your existing school systems, with your educators, with your parents, with your students? Really, really important. What tools are you using? What process are you going through? How are you getting started? Those are the things that I see as being most successful in school districts who are engaging and engaging well, and in states who are engaging well and engaging thoughtfully with a diverse set of stakeholders. The other thing I will say, I want to call out Sally Holloway and the Rockstar team in Gwinnett, another one of our policy labs, who has this model that I just want everybody to like just buck up and adopt, which is everybody needs to be able, so it's called swim, snorkel, scuba. So to Fran's point, everybody needs to be able to swim. Everybody needs that free course that they can understand the basics. Like we want everybody to be able to swim. And then other folks are going to be able to, snorkel and to scuba. And you can scaffold, again, old school pedagogy here, y'all. We can scaffold resources to be able to support folks who want to scuba, who want to snorkel. And that idea that you're scaffolding professional development, not just for educators, but for everyone in the building, and really think about doing that for your communities as well. Is there actually a free AI literacy or AI fluency course you could offer to parents? as something that you do at back to school, that you could offer to students at back to school, so that that transparency isn't just with your education kind of folks who are in your system, but it's folks who are in your ecosystem. And so I just want to pull out those transparency, swim, snorkel, scuba, and what does it look like to really think about that entire ecosystem?
Mm. Yes, and quickly, like in New York City, you know, we were really leading the charge in a lot of ways on the technical front, launching the K-12 the AI Policy Lab, but we really doubled down on what are our existing policies and are people aware of those? You know, really take a deep dive, I'd say, as a step one. What are your existing policies for every stakeholder, and is there an awareness of those policies? And then, do you actually need to tweak to address AI, or can you lean into your existing policies and work within that? And then, how are you making sure that awareness of those policies is communicated and measured, even if you can? I know resources are challenging, but if you can measure actual awareness of policies for every stakeholder, from parents to students to educators to leaders, that's a great start. So thinking of, but coming back to the educator, the student learning with AI, and that perspective, uh, I'd really love to jump into like what role we think AI should actually play in learning, curriculum development, instruction, assessment design. And Nika, I know you have an example from Gwinnett County that you can share. So we'd love to get specific and hear an example, and then jump around the boxes and hear from everyone else.
Well, yes. So Erin did such an excellent job of kind of giving that overview from Gwinnett County, who has been doing this work for a number of years. And whenever any district leader, I am discussing the work of AI, I say, definitely look at them as a model because they are one of the first. In general, what I would say, and Fran spoke to this as well, is creating different types of committees to help build the AI work within school systems is going to be essential. And in particular, one thing I haven't heard, but is really essential, and I face this, is including our board members, because for many of us, they are the faces of our communities, and they need to be hyper aware. As we discussed earlier, in school, in districts like Gwinnett County, who've really done the work, New York City really done the work. We heard about Philadelphia really doing this work. We understand that bridge between what we're doing in the educational space and how that branches out to our community through our board members are essential. And so, again, I'll piggyback on that swim, snorkel, scuba. But also, if you're in a leadership position, or if you're helping leaders and you do not yet have committees with multiple community members from different lived experiences in that committee, now is the time to start. Thank you.
Thank you. Fran, Nathan, want to jump in and your thoughts on this?
I would say initially, when we were looking at the integration of AI in instruction, everyone was very focused on personalization and accommodations. And in practice, in the past year, teachers are very interested in support with administrative tasks, just being very real. And I think where we're landing is that AI can have a very strong role as a tutor, helping to close the gaps, some of the instructional gaps that we're seeing. We're concerned about its role in assessment. We really think that teachers have to be assessing students. But the personalization piece has been a little bit problematic because of our core adopted programs. Like, we're very into the science of reading right now. And a lot of our core adopted program is talking about instruction at grade level. So we're having a lot of deep conversation about how much personalization can you really do? You really want to stay true to the program. So we're grappling with that right now. We are.
Thank you. I think it's living in the reality and being honest about it, and also wanting to provide that science of reading approach, high quality instructional materials and grade level for every student. So thank you for being honest. And Nathan, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I would just say generally on this topic, no matter how folks are deciding how to use AI, what role it should play, I think one of the most important things that we can be doing is creating goals, goal setting, right? There's a fear, this is anecdotal, so I don't know how widespread this belief is, but I sense somewhat of a vibe from the policy space that there's a lot of pressure to act. And I do think that there is kind of a warranted explanation here that this is here. Schools should really be preparing. But at the same time, we don't want to just implement AI for AI's sake, right? We want to have a goal in mind, whether that goal is we will implement AI to improve like engagement amongst our classrooms or to improve student literacy or math outcomes. I think that's just a really, really important first step, regardless of the specific role. And I also just, I don't know, I think about this a lot, but like, what is the role of AI? What is the job of AI? What do we want it to do? And what do we want school systems to do when it comes to teaching AI? And personally, I don't think that it is the job of our education system to teach students to use tools. This is something that Fran mentioned earlier. Tools are tools. Tools are means to an end, right? It's a way to get somewhere. And I think that the hope, again, in all kind of roles of AI in education, and the implementation of those technologies into educational settings is to provide students with essential foundational skills that will enable them to thrive in a world where AI is everywhere. And so this is less about like what specific role and more just generally like, I do think these goal setting measures are very, very important early action when you're exploring AI usage at the district or school level or as a teacher.
Well, I think that's a really good point and good transition. And maybe Aaron, you want to kick off on this one. I'm going to go a little out of order here. Um, Quickly, just maybe like a one or two sentence answer from the panelists on are we required in education to teach the digital skill of AI, and will that be as foundational perhaps as math and literacy are to develop future ready skills beyond just those core foundational skills? Is that skill going to become a core foundational digital skill that we need to think of like math and literacy? I know that's hard to answer in two sentences. Do your best. Erin, we'll start with you and
Yeah,
we'll go.
great. Awesome. So, I actually think we need to talk about what is the purpose of education. And if the purpose of education is to make sure that students are authentically learning, we don't need AI to do that. So this is going to be longer than two sentences, Tara, because I'm going to bring out my soapbox. But we need to think about what are the learning experiences that we want to create. So I am a mom of two kids who are 7 and 10. And the things I'm thinking about is how do they have the skills, competencies, and dispositions to work in an AI-enabled world? That means they're going to need creative thinking. They're going to need working in multifunctional teams. They're going to need critical thinking and problem solving. They're going to need to be able to understand the difference between when they're using AI tools to cognitively offload the work, and when they're using AI tools to make them, or any technology, to inform, process, understand their arguments, and gain access to knowledge. And so I am deeply anchored here when I have this conversation with policymakers, with folks in school districts, with parents and researchers, which is the question of what does the science of learning and development tell us about what young people need to be those whitewater kayakers, to have that resilience, that grit, that perseverance that they're going to need in a rapidly changing world. They are not on those steamships. They are not on those sailboats. They are in those kayaks. And since I founded a school, more than a decade ago, I will tell you that all I've been thinking about is those whitewater kayakers, including my own two kayakers, Robert and Claire. And as a parent and an educator, how do I get to those skills? And that probably goes to the types of learning experiences we're creating for young people. One of the reasons AI is so disruptive in our space and education is because we've built a system around rote memorization. And what is generative AI so very good at? Rote memorization and cognitive offloading. And so that pulls us into questions about our assessment, our learning experiences, what's the experiences that young people are having in the classroom. This is why it's such a significant system disruptor to education, because we actually haven't built a learning system, we've built a schooling system. Okay, I'm going to tuck my soapbox back under the chair now. Thank you.
Can I get out of the chair just
Do
a
it.
minute, Erin, just to piggyback? Because you're so right with that critical thinking. And I think this goes beyond like AI. Because again, we've had many ed tech, systems or tech systems in general, going way back to the old 1500s when Magica Laterna was the big thing of the day that was going to transform education. I also have to bring out that, AI is not the end. You have quantum computing coming, you have things that are coming that if education just focuses on the moment of AI, my fear is that if we don't teach those critical thinking skills, conversational skills, collaboration skills, computational thinking, complex thinking. Then when something like quantum computing comes and it has its QGPT moment, now we're scrambling again because we haven't taught those essential thinking skills. So I think it's going to be important for us as we're continuing this conversation about AI in education that we also think about what's next and prepare our students accordingly. And it doesn't mean that a kid has to become a quantum physicist, but it does mean that some of these foundational pieces like math, like reading comprehension, like the things that we, have held dear in educational systems that may think like, what are we still doing this for? There are reasons for it that are essential.
Fantastic. Fran, did you want to jump in?
I agree 100% with Erin and Nika, and I'm going to get a little basic right now. I do think that educators need some kind of AI literacy grounding. They do need to understand these tools a little bit better, and they have to understand the full scope of being future ready. So I believe that and I think students too, like we offer digital literacy and coding, and we've integrated AI lessons into it, but not every school is required to offer it. They are required to offer literacy and math, of course. So I do believe that we need it, and I don't think we will see it. Not yet. I haven't seen it yet. Like computer science is not mandatory in Pennsylvania. It's recommended. It's not mandatory. So,
Nathan, any quick thoughts on this?
I'll just add, we're talking about building blocks, right? Things kind of required to access this space and for students to learn and what foundational skills are necessary. And I want to just take a moment to also talk about like the actual tangible like infrastructure that's needed in order to access this as well. A lot of folks are talking about AI, and folks maybe think it can sometimes feel like when we're thinking about AI access, it means like access to that tool, right? So if it's ChatGPT, students have an account and they're able to use ChatGPT, but there are prerequisites in order to use AI, a lot of AI tools. The first is a device to use it on, and the second is internet. And we live in a country, America, where not every student has internet access. And so I sometimes feel like, what do we want to prioritize in this moment? It will probably change from district to district and across different states, but we need to ensure that learners have like these basic needs met first, right, before we kind of jump there. And for some districts, for some schools, that might be starting with access to internet, high speed and affordable internet at home for students.
Yeah, I mean, that's foundational. Coming from New York City, every child, regardless of zip code, background, access to resources, investment, like that is a core part of what digital equity is. And also digital equity is not only access to that high quality internet access, working devices, but also the digital skilling that's required to actually apply the skills in order to pursue economic security and pursue, lifelong learning, uh, either career or college options. And so to me and in our approach in New York City, and this is, speaking outside of just the New York City approach in terms of being a mom and how I think of all the students I had as my kids, it's a non-negotiable to take a business-minded approach to this for equity. Because who are the decision makers in this space? Who decides what districts and what students get access and who doesn't? And what are the long-term effects of that? And we're already living within long-term effects of decisions being made or without clarity by a small amount of people oftentimes, and not thinking of the collective whole. And so when I think of global competitiveness, I think of the future of our economy. It starts with education. Okay, we're going to get
Yeah.
to Q&A very quickly. Go ahead,
Can I
Nika.
add something?
Jump in. Please
Because
do.
Nathan made a very important point, and I think this is where other countries can really help, and even in our country. So they are creating different types of systems that don't require internet access. They also use things like zero rating, where internet access is provided without certain costs, and things such as small language models that enable them to utilize LLMs, other types of generative AI without necessarily having all of the components that we would necessarily think of for access. And so it is so important. We have places in the United States, trust and believe, where there are school districts that still don't have Wi-Fi access. So even in our country, we have a long way to go. But I think it is, as Fran said, the kind of hope in terms of that access. Why there's still such a long way to go, it's great to know that efforts are being made in order to increase access among learners.
And I think this question of access and of widening gaps, bridging versus widening gaps has been reflected in the questions that have come through the Q&A. So I'm going to quickly just ask this to our panelists and then open it up for more Q&A and directly answer some questions. So what do we think of AI's potential to either bridge or widen gaps in education? And Aaron Moat, I'm starting with you. So I saw you cross your hands and you're ready to answer. I know it.
I would just say there's no clear answer here. It's up to us. This is a technology that has both promise and peril. The question is, what choices as an education system are we going to make about the use of this technology, about access and opportunity? So completely dissatisfying answer, but every single person on this call has a role in answering this question. What is the future you want to create for your kids, for your schools, for your educators, for your communities? Because we do have a lot of power here, y'all, to shape what this is. And we also, to Fran's point, have to hold up the mirror and say where we haven't done this well in the past, i.e. social media, y'all. Let's just be truth tellers. The consequences are vast and severe. So let's remember that and decide, do we want to have a system where humans flourish or something else?
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go in this order to finish off the answers, then open it up. Nika, then Nathan, and we're going to round out with you, Fran. So bridging the gap or widening the gap for AI in education?
Sorry, did you say Fran or Nika? I
Sorry.
apologize.
Who's listening? No, I'm joking. Nika, I said you, but
Oh, okay.
whoever wants to
Well,
answer.
I mean, I'm going to piggyback off Aaron. It does rely on us and the intentionality that we place. As a lesson that we've learned, we've heard from Fran when we talked about, social media and how we dealt with even the internet. Wikipedia, I mean, the stories that if we push it to the side and say we don't have to deal with it, we're going to deal with it. It just may be 20 to 30 years down the road. So we can't look at AI in 20 years and say we didn't know, because we do know that we can be empowered to make a difference. What I do have concerns about AI haves and have nots. In the district, where I served as CAO, we had what we called city schools and country schools. And the city schools, had more access, had more resources. We had our country school where the border fence was right across the street to Mexico. And sometimes you had internet access, sometimes you didn't. Sometimes you had issues with accessing resources, sometimes you didn't. And when those kind of minimal things are in play, it can broaden it. But again, what steps are you taking? We started to take steps to make sure that divide didn't happen. So the key point here is intentionality, and the second key point is empowerment.
I'll add too that so many of the different things that we've discussed, even on this panel, have the power to either bridge or widen gaps, right? So we talk about access, right? There's a world in which students have access to internet and devices and tools, and this gap potentially, bridges. Bias and literacy trainings, AI literacy trainings. You might have some schools that have robust AI literacy trainings and some that don't. And if all do, that could bridge gaps. If all don't, that could widen gaps. And so it really is, as Aaron said, it depends. And one of the things I really like to center some of the final thoughts I have on AI, when you're out and about, or at least when I'm out and about and listening to folks talk about AI, it sometimes feels like it is this omnipotent, amorphous being that is just here, and it's powerful, and it's going to be embedded throughout education systems. And the reality is, as Aaron said, we get to choose. We have a lot of power here. We get to choose the ways we use AI and why we use it. School systems get to make those decisions. And so also, like, I think there's a lot of potential in either the bridging or the widening of gaps in that decision-making process, right? One kind of specific example is, like, do you prioritize relationships? You might see some schools who make decisions to use AI in ways that increase the amount of time that students and teachers have interactions, can interact and learn. You could see other examples where schools rely on AI to just be kind of a computer screen that students are plugged into and remove social interaction. And so I think it really depends. And there are a lot of different directions. And I think a lot of it depends on the decisions that we make as users and as school systems, which is not really a satisfying answer, but.
Fran, because I know you can do it. I'd love for you to answer this, but also from your perspective, there's a question on how are we engaging families? How and could families be engaged as partners with teachers and instructional leaders when it comes to AI? So would love to hear on bridging versus widening the gap, and then maybe some examples on how you've created that connection and partnership in your district.
I believe with intentionality, education, support, that AI will bridge and create more opportunity. Definitely. And parents and students, this is a conversation we're having a lot now. We rely a lot on the adults to provide the information to the students and our families. How can we go direct? This is our new conversation. How can we go direct to students with information, posters, and a little asynchronous course? How can we provide information direct to our families? Our families are very important. They don't some of them do not understand some of the concepts we've been talking about. So how do we define vocabulary, explain things? So that's what we're talking about right now. How can we use our parent university to create courses for our parents that are interested? And we're talking with our comms department. How do we go broader and have like a pamphlet, like AI basics? How can we inform and educate our parents the way we are talking about informing and educating our educators?
Fantastic. Aaron, do you want to jump in on some of like the family and student partnership? I will say with the Policy Lab, when we launched it, students ran it first.
They did. It was
We launched the AI
amazing.
Policy Lab with students first. And what came from that, in a quick anecdote, was how students were helping their parents with their own jobs, even to structure information, to think of how to frame something or say something. And then bringing us the use cases. The students have their own use cases. We don't need to, the answers are there from everyone right in front of us. So Aaron, what are your thoughts on that family partnership and teacher partnership piece?
Yeah, every time you talk about the student policy lab, I have like the sensory reaction of like the smell of Mountain Dew and pizza together, because that's what we fed the kids. All my educators get that. It's like a sensory thing. I can like smell the pizza, the Domino's. So I would just say that if there's one thing you can do, kind of wherever you are on the spectrum, it's this conversation around AI literacy within your communities. And tomorrow we are going to announce the third annual National AI Literacy Day. Folks are going to get to know the save the date tomorrow. We're doing it earlier than we ever have before. This will be our third one. And there are resources, there are events that happen across all over the country. Folks do this in school districts, states like Ohio and Colorado last year did statewide initiatives. And it really was just around this, like, how do we build a conversation? How do we create an entry point for everyone around what is AI? How do we just have that first conversation around AI literacy? And that's something I think everybody walking off this call and thinking about next school year, what can I do next year? What can I start planning for? Join us at National AI Literacy Day, but also be thinking about what your role is in literacies. The other thing I'll just say is students can be great ambassadors for your communities. That was certainly the case in New York. It's certainly been the case in places like Santa Ana and El Segundo and Cannon City, Colorado, where we have other policy labs. And often they can be translators and help folks really understand what's the things that they're thinking about, what's the things that are front of mind, and some of the challenges that frankly we've worked on from a policy perspective have come directly from youth. So EdSafe AI had a huge push, and we worked with districts to create resources around non-consensual intimate images. This is, images that are being made of young people that are fake, that are intimate in nature, or the use of character-led AI to have sort of fake conversations. I would have never known about the proliferation of this as sort of a scourge, a risk, something that young people are really worried about without talking to young people. So focus on literacy. Think about young people as being able to reach out and be your ambassadors, but also your critical users. I think somebody in the chat talked about how they're already in some ways passing educators in terms of implementation. Harness that power to understand what they're thinking about.
Fantastic. I'm going to move just to another question just to make sure that, and maybe Nika and Nathan, you guys can jump in on this. What strategies are out there to ensure that key pillars aren't also blockers from governmental legal policy mandates and then maybe local context safety policies and guardrails? So what strategies are out there to ensure that key pillars aren't also blockers?
I can briefly take a stab at this. I think about this question, government and legal policy. I think in many ways people can think of that as regulations, right? And the fact of the matter is that there are a few states that have regulated AI at the state level, right? Colorado passed the Colorado AI Act. Texas just passed regulations, I think like a few days ago. But we do not have anything at the national level. Folks might be familiar with the EU AI Act. That is passed by the EU. It creates a risk management framework, and it defines most educational uses of AI as high risk, which puts obligations on developers and deployers of AI. And none of that exists really at the American level. And so and I would argue, I'm sure other folks might disagree. I would argue stuff like that is actually needed, right? I hear a lot in America specifically in context around the EU AI Act, like this is going to stifle innovation. This will create roadblocks for districts to hurdle over. But we are so early on in the process that putting forth regulations right now provides an opportunity for organizations and schools and developers of AI to build around regulations, to build knowing that is the underlying context. And it becomes much harder the further and further and further we wait. And so I understand kind of this general notion about these pillars being blockers, but I do think for the most part, we don't see a lot of that yet. There are just a few states, and a lot of guidance that's coming out at the state level is not mandatory guidance. It's just suggestions for districts to consider. So I don't think there are many sincere blockers yet.
So, and just to piggyback, because yes, TRIGA did pass in Texas. It's interesting if you follow the pathway of the bill about how many safeguards and regulations and restrictions they had in place that didn't end up in the final bill that Governor Abbott just signed. With that passage, though, I think many states are going to kind of be in a holding pattern because if Congress does pass the provisions of the bill that's currently up for discussion, that means that there will be no regulations for 10 years on AI. And so many of these regulations and laws will have to be revisited. For those who think, well, oh my gosh, I remember when the internet came out, like, I mean, I'm showing my age, but I had the type of modem where you put the phone headpiece on the modem. There were like no regulations. Who knows who I was talking to back then? I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying that there is, a historical precedence for not having regulations. And where would the internet be had there been the type of regulate good or bad, right? That's the discussion that people need to have. We know there's a lot of good. We know there's a lot of bad. I'm just speaking to the precedence of it and why people are thinking that regulations can be a hindrance to progress. Given what we do know, it would be chilling not to have safeguards in place because we know of things of like what happened with social media that we're having to deal with now. So that's my perspective, but I do at its heart believe that many states are not going to really move forward until they determine, until the federal government determines how they're going to move forward.
Okay, great. So I have our final question. What a panel. What a lot of information. Great questions. Thank you all to the attendees for being here and bringing your energy because we feel it. Final question for everyone. What do you hope for AI and its application in education? And I will start, which is transformation and enthusiasm. That's what I hope is a real change will come that is long overdue for education. And I'm going to pass it to Nathan and then Fran, Neka, and end with Aaron. So
Yeah.
Nathan, you're on.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. There are two real hopes I have. The first is that the narrative that wins out at the end of the day is not one of FOMO. I really hope that districts and school leaders, FOMO is fear of missing out. I really hope that districts and school leaders don't feel pressured to act very quickly, especially districts who might lack resources to have the support and structures necessary. I really hope that folks adopt a slow and steady, and most importantly, an intentional approach, right? Some districts are able to move quickly, others might not be able to, and we need to, as a policy community, identify those who can't move quickly and support. The second thing is I just hope that there is movement on funding and resources at state and federal levels for AI literacy trainings. We need teachers to be AI literate. I think it is priority number one. And that only happens if there is significant involvement from state and federal governments.
Fran?
My hope is achievement for all students getting what they need so that they can be productive and happy and successful. We've been looking for these tools. This could be it. Well implemented.
Love it. With humans.
Absolutely with humans. I think I've said that
You said it a lot. That's why you've said it tons.
Humans, but it could be like
combo for sure. For
Yes.
sure. Thanks,
Yes.
Fran. And Nika?
Yeah, my hope is just to piggyback off Nathan, slow and steady will win the race. I know that it seems like, and you hear every time I hear somebody's like, you must implement it today. It goes back to what Nathan was saying. And Fran, if you don't know what you're implementing, how is that going to be successful? So I do think that we have time. There are times when I wish it was kind of pre-ChatGPT and when the work that we were doing was kind of more entrenched on pedagogy and things of that nature and not worried about cheating. Like when the cheating thing came up, I was so surprised because at that point, I think I've been working with AI for maybe 5 years. And I was like, yeah, we've been using it. No one ever worried about cheating. I get the concerns about it, but I think that goes back to if you don't have the foundational knowledge, you don't have that AI literacy that we've talked about so much, that's going to be the default, right? The fear is going to be the default. So knowledge alleviates fear. And so I want us to become knowledgeable about the what is called the promises and the peril, as Aaron reflected on. The other part is again that we teach our kids how to think. I think if we teach kids how to think, be agile and adapt, it will not matter what technology, emerging or otherwise, comes their way. They will be ready, and that's what I want for our kids, to be ready. Thank you.
Aaron.
Yeah, I want us to move from a schooling system to a learning system. We need to do that for all young people, but actually for all humans, and center the needs of a diverse group of learners when we're designing that learning system. And so I believe AI offers the challenge and sort of the right questions right now about the system we currently have, because it fundamentally points out so many of the flaws in the system that we've built that is not moving the needle for all kids. We need to say that aloud and be ready to raise our voice and to do the things that move us forward in that direction.
Thank you. And thank you all, wonderful co-panelists. I'm going to pass it back to Hillary.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Tara, and to all of our panelists, Aaron, for helping pull this group together and all the invitations, and all of you for your expertise. Just really the call to not let this be another thing to add to your plate, but look at the challenge and the potential, look at the caution, and pay attention to the impact that it has on our young people. So if you, our audience, enjoyed the session today, please let us know what you heard and what you plan to use in your own community, places, and spaces. I dropped an additional form in the chat that you can share. We'd also encourage you to join us for the rest of the EdTech Institute. You can register for it now, and don't forget that the culmination of this is with GLR Week, a whole week long of learning and opportunities for you to engage with the GLR communities. And so we hope that you register and attend those sessions, that although there's one talking about EdTech, there's also a wide variety of other topics during that week. So thank you all one more time, and it was a pleasure to have you.